The detention facility on Kepler Station buzzed with the usual sounds of alien chatter, but today something was different. Word had spread through the corridors like wildfire about the new prisoner in cell block 7. A human child, they said. Just a kid who'd been caught smuggling medical supplies to the Outer Rim colonies. Sarah Martinez sat cross-legged on the cold metal floor of her cell, her dark eyes fixed on the small datapad she'd managed to hide from the guards during processing. At 15, she was small for her age, with tangled brown hair and clothes that had seen better days. The hegemony officers who'd arrested her had laughed when they'd thrown her in here with hardened criminals and political prisoners. "Look at the little monkey," one of the Draknari guards had sneered, his reptilian features twisting into what passed for amusement among his species. "Does Mama know you're playing with the big boys?" Sarah hadn't responded. She'd learned early in life that words were often wasted on those who'd already made up their minds about you. Instead, she'd simply watched and listened, filing away every detail about the station's layout, guard rotations, and security protocols. The other prisoners had initially been just as dismissive. The cell block housed some of the most dangerous beings in this sector of the galaxy. There was Vextar, a Zephyrian assassin whose 4 arms had once strangled a planetary governor. In the corner sat Morgul, a Thessarian pirate captain who'd terrorized shipping lanes for decades. Even the quieter inmates were there for serious crimes against the hegemony. But Sarah's arrival had stirred something unexpected. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, or the fact that she'd been caught running supplies to rebel colonies. Or maybe it was simply the audacity of seeing a human child in a place like this. "Hey, little star," called out Zikna, a blue-skinned Altarian female with intricate tattoos covering her arms. "What's a seedling like you doing in the deep dark?" Sarah looked up from her datapad, meeting the alien woman's curious gaze. "Same thing as everyone else, I imagine. Wrong place, wrong time." This drew chuckles from several cells. Zikna had been imprisoned for leading food riots on the agricultural worlds, and she'd seen enough suffering to recognize someone who understood real hardship. "Wrong place, wrong time," Zikna repeated, nodding slowly. "But you don't look scared, little star. Most humans your age would be crying for their parents by now." "Crying doesn't change anything," Sarah replied simply. "Besides, my father always said that fear is just information. It tells you what needs your attention." Vextar's 4 arms stopped their constant grooming ritual. "Your father sounds wise. Is he a warrior?" Sarah's expression flickered for just a moment, something unreadable passing across her features. "He's complicated." The conversation was interrupted by the harsh sound of boots on metal. A squad of Draknari guards marched down the corridor, their leader a particularly large specimen with fresh scars across his snout. This was Commander Sektoth, the station's head of prisoner operations, and he had a reputation for creative cruelty. "Well, well," Sektoth rumbled, stopping in front of Sarah's cell. "The famous human smuggler. I hear you've been quite the little rebel, running supplies to the outer colonies." Sarah stood slowly, dusting off her pants. Even at her full height, she barely reached the alien's chest. "I prefer to think of it as humanitarian aid." Sektoth's laugh was a harsh, grating sound. "Humanitarian aid? To terrorists and separatists? Your species always did have a talent for self-deception." "Better than having a talent for oppressing people who just want to be left alone," Sarah shot back. The corridor fell silent. Even the usual background noise of the detention facility seemed to pause. Talking back to a hegemony officer was a serious offense, and doing it as a human child was practically suicidal. Sektoth's eyes narrowed to slits. "I see someone hasn't taught you proper respect. No matter. We have time to correct that oversight." He gestured to his subordinates, who began unlocking Sarah's cell door. Transfer the human to interrogation room 3. It's time she learned what happens to little rebels who forget their place. As they dragged her from the cell, Sarah caught Zikna's eye. The Altarian woman's expression was grim, and she mouthed a single word: "Run." But Sarah didn't run. As they hauled her down the corridor, she continued to observe and catalog. Security cameras at every junction, guard posts at regular intervals, blast doors every 50 meters. The station was well fortified, but every fortress had weaknesses. Interrogation Room 3 was exactly what she'd expected. A sparse metal chamber with a single chair, restraint fields, and various unpleasant-looking devices mounted on the walls. Sektoth dismissed his subordinates, apparently wanting to handle this personally. "Now then," he said, circling the chair where they'd strapped Sarah down. "Let's discuss your little smuggling operation. Names, locations, supply routes. Make this easy on yourself." "I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah replied calmly. "I was just a passenger on that transport." Sektoth activated one of the wall-mounted devices, and Sarah's whole body convulsed as neural disruptors sent pain signals racing through her nervous system. When it stopped, she was breathing hard, but hadn't made a sound. "Impressive," the commander admitted. "Most humans would be screaming by now. You've had training." "I've had practice," Sarah corrected, which was true enough. Growing up the way she had, pain tolerance wasn't optional. For the next 2 hours, Sektoth worked methodically through his arsenal of interrogation techniques: physical pain, psychological pressure, sensory deprivation. Sarah endured it all with the same quiet determination, giving up nothing useful. Her only concession was the occasional sharp intake of breath when the pain became particularly intense. "Remarkable," Sektoth finally said, switching off the latest device. "I've broken Thessarian death cultists with less effort. Who trained you, child?" Sarah's voice was hoarse but steady when she answered. "Like I said, my father." "This mysterious father of yours. What's his name?" For the first time since her arrest, Sarah smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression on a 15-year-old's face. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." Sektoth leaned closer, his reptilian features inches from her face. "Try me." "Marcus Chen." The name hung in the air like a physical presence. Sektoth's confident expression slowly shifted to confusion, then recognition, then something approaching fear. That's impossible," he whispered. "Marcus Chen is a myth, a ghost story the rebels tell to frighten soldiers." Sarah's smile widened. "Is he?" The commander stepped back, his hands shaking slightly as he reached for his communication device. "I need a priority channel to Hegemony Central Command. Emergency classification." While he waited for the connection, Sarah tested the restraints holding her to the chair. Still secure, but she'd noticed that the neural disruptors had caused some fluctuation in the containment field generators. Another few sessions, and she might be able to create enough instability to break free. The communication device crackled to life and a harsh voice filled the room. "This is Admiral Creston of Central Command. What is the nature of your emergency, Commander?" "Sir, we have a situation. A human prisoner claims to be the daughter of Marcus Chen." There was a long pause before the Admiral responded. "Describe this human." Sektoth glanced at Sarah nervously. "Female, approximately 15 standard years old, dark hair, human normal height, arrested during the raids on the Kepler shipping lanes." "And her behavior during interrogation?" "Completely resistant to standard techniques. No fear response, minimal pain response, refused to provide any operational intelligence. He swallowed hard. "She smiled when she gave me the name." Another pause, longer this time. When Admiral Creston spoke again, his voice had taken on a different tone entirely. "Commander, you will cease all interrogation activities immediately. Place the human in protective custody, maximum security. Do not harm her. Do not speak to her. Do not even look at her unless absolutely necessary. Am I clear?" Sektoth's confusion was evident in his voice. "Sir, I don't understand. She's just a child. Even if she is related to this Marcus Chen person—" "Commander!" The Admiral's voice cut through his protests like a blade. "Marcus Chen is no myth. He is very real, and he is very much alive. The fact that you don't know this tells me exactly how far above your security clearance this situation is. Follow my orders precisely, or you'll find yourself on the wrong end of a court-martial." The communication cut off, leaving Sektoth staring at the device in disbelief. He looked at Sarah with new eyes, seeing not a defiant child, but something far more dangerous. "Who is your father?" he asked quietly. Sarah's restraints disengaged with a soft hiss as Sektoth activated the release controls. She stood slowly, rubbing her wrists where the metal had chafed her skin. "That," she said, walking toward the door, "is the wrong question, Commander. The question you should be asking is, what does he do when people hurt his daughter?" The door slid open, revealing a squad of guards who'd apparently been ordered to escort her to new accommodations. As they led her through the corridors, Sarah noticed the change in atmosphere. Word traveled fast on a space station, and it seemed that Admiral Cresthan's orders had already filtered down through the command structure. Guards who'd been sneering at her just hours before now avoided eye contact. Officers who'd been discussing her case in loud, dismissive tones fell silent when she passed. Even the automated systems seemed different somehow, as if the station itself had been put on high alert. Her new cell was in a different section entirely, one reserved for high-value prisoners. The accommodations were significantly better than the detention facility, with actual furniture, a private hygiene station, and what appeared to be access to the station's entertainment networks. As the guards sealed her in and retreated to their posts, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Phase 1 was complete. She'd identified herself to the hegemony's command structure, and they'd reacted exactly as expected. Now came the waiting. She activated the room's entertainment console and began browsing through news feeds from across the galaxy. Most of it was the usual hegemony propaganda, but she knew how to read between the lines. Reports of terrorist activities on the Outer Rim were increasing. Supply shipments to hegemony colonies were being mysteriously delayed or rerouted. Several high-ranking officials had been found dead in circumstances that the authorities were calling accidents. The rebellion was growing, and her father's network was becoming more active, which meant her capture hadn't been the accident it appeared to be. It had been planned, carefully orchestrated to put her exactly where she needed to be. Sarah pulled up a star chart on the console, studying the shipping lanes around Kepler Station. If she was right about the timing, then somewhere out there in the vast darkness of space, her father had received word of her capture. And if she knew Marcus Chen at all, he was already moving. The hegemony had made two critical mistakes. First, they'd assumed that capturing a human child would be a minor victory, something to be handled through routine channels. Second, they'd underestimated exactly what lengths a father would go to retrieve his daughter. Sarah settled back in her chair, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Let them think they had her contained. Let them believe their security measures would hold. They had no idea what was coming for them. In the depths of space, forces were already in motion that would shake the foundations of their precious regime. Her father had spent years building a network of allies, weapons, and resources specifically for moments like this. The hegemony liked to tell themselves that humanity was just another conquered species, useful for manual labor but no real threat to galactic order. They were about to learn how wrong they were. As night cycle approached on the station, Sarah lay down on the small but comfortable bed and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, but for now, she would rest and prepare. After all, her father had taught her that patience was just as important as courage in warfare. And this was definitely warfare, even if the enemy didn't realize it yet. Sarah woke to the sound of alarms echoing through Kepler Station's corridors. Red emergency lights bathed her cell in an ominous glow, and she could hear the heavy footsteps of guards running past her door. She checked the chronometer on the wall display and smiled. Right on schedule. 3 days had passed since Admiral Creston's orders had placed her in protective custody. 3 days of careful observation, polite meals delivered by nervous guards, and apparent cooperation with her captors. 3 days for word of her presence to filter through hegemony intelligence networks and reach the people who needed to know. The station's intercom crackled to life with Commander Sektoth's voice, though he sounded considerably less confident than he had during their first meeting. All stations, this is command. We have multiple unidentified contacts approaching on long-range sensors. Defense Condition 2 is now in effect. All security personnel report to assigned positions. Sarah moved to the small porthole in her cell wall and peered out into space. At first, she saw nothing but stars and the usual traffic around the station. Then, almost invisible against the cosmic background, she spotted them. Ships running dark, their engines powered down to minimal signatures, drifting in on momentum alone. Her father's people were very good at their jobs. The door to her cell hissed open, and 2 guards entered. These weren't the usual Draknari security forces, but elite Thessarian commandos in full battle armor. Their leader, identifiable by the additional rank insignia on his helmet, gestured for her to stand. "Human, you will come with us. Admiral Creston wishes to speak with you immediately." Sarah stood slowly, making no sudden movements. Elite troops like these wouldn't hesitate to stun her if they perceived any threat. "Of course. I'm always happy to chat with admirals." They escorted her through corridors filled with running personnel and blinking warning lights. The normal operation of the station had been replaced by controlled chaos as crew members rushed to battle stations. Sarah noted the positions of weapons lockers, communication nodes, and emergency systems as they walked. The command center was a hive of activity when they arrived. Dozens of technicians worked frantically at their stations, while officers barked orders and updated tactical displays. At the center of it all stood Admiral Creston himself, a towering draconian with jet-black scales and intelligent golden eyes. He turned as Sarah was brought forward, his expression unreadable. "Miss Martinez, how good of you to join us." "I wasn't aware I had a choice," Sarah replied calmly. "Though I appreciate the escort. Your station is lovely at this time of day." Creston's mouth curved in what might have been amusement on a human face. "Your composure is remarkable for someone your age. Tell me, are you familiar with the ships currently approaching our position?" Sarah glanced at the tactical display where dozens of red contacts were steadily closing distance with the station. The computer was having difficulty getting solid readings on them, which meant they were using sophisticated stealth technology. "They look like ships to me," she said with a shrug. "But I'm just a kid who got caught smuggling medical supplies. What would I know about military vessels?" "Indeed." Creston moved closer, his massive frame looming over her. "Perhaps you could explain why these unidentified vessels appeared precisely 72 hours after your arrest? Or why their approach vector suggests intimate knowledge of our patrol patterns?" Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "Coincidence?" The Admiral's laugh was a low, rumbling sound. "Miss Martinez, I have commanded hegemony forces for over 30 years. I have fought rebels, pirates, and independence movements across 17 star systems. I know what a coordinated rescue operation looks like." A junior officer approached the command platform, his four-armed Vrellan frame trembling with nervous energy. "Sir, the approaching vessels have just achieved weapons range. They're not responding to our hails." "Of course they're not," Creston muttered. He activated the station's general communication system. Unknown vessels, this is Admiral Creston of Hegemony Station Kepler. You are approaching a restricted military installation. Identify yourselves and state your intentions, or we will consider your presence an act of aggression. The response came not through standard communication channels, but through the station's emergency broadcast system. Someone had hacked directly into their communications grid, which should have been impossible given the quantum encryption protocols in use. The voice that filled the command center was calm, measured, and utterly human. Admiral Creston, this is Marcus Chen. You have something that belongs to me. The effect of those words on the command center was immediate and dramatic. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Officers turned pale, or whatever their species equivalent was. Several junior personnel actually stepped away from their stations, as if proximity to the communication system made them somehow complicit in whatever was about to happen. Admiral Creston's confident demeanor cracked slightly, revealing the first hint of uncertainty Sarah had seen from him. Marcus Chen, the legend himself, graces us with his presence. I prefer to think of myself as a concerned father, came the reply. You've been holding my daughter for 3 days without charge. I'd like her back. Your daughter is safe and well treated. Perhaps we can discuss terms for her release through proper diplomatic channels. There was a pause before Marcus Chen's voice returned, and when it did, the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Admiral, I'm going to explain something to you very carefully. There are no diplomatic channels when it comes to my family. There are no negotiations, no compromises, no political considerations. There is only this. Return my daughter unharmed, and your people live to see another day. Sarah watched the faces around the command center with interest. Some of the younger officers looked confused, unsure why a single human's threats were being taken so seriously. But the veterans, the ones who'd been fighting on the rim for decades, wore expressions of barely controlled fear. You're threatening a hegemony military installation, Creston said, though his voice had lost much of its authority. This station has a complement of over 10,000 personnel and defensive capabilities that could repel a battle fleet. Admiral, Marcus Chen's voice was patient, almost kindly. 3 years ago, I reduced the fortress world of Tarnex Prime to radioactive ash using nothing but its own defense grid and a handful of modified cargo haulers. 2 years ago, I convinced the entire 7th Fleet to defect by demonstrating that I could access their personal files, their family records, even their private communications. Last year, I turned the hegemony's own propaganda networks into recruitment tools for the rebellion. Did you really think a single space station would present a significant challenge? The tactical officer suddenly looked up from his console, his face pale. Sir, we're detecting massive power fluctuations in our defensive systems. It looks like someone is accessing our control networks. That's impossible, Creston snapped. Our systems are air-gapped from external access. There's no way. His words were cut off as every display in the command center flickered. When they stabilized, they no longer showed station status or tactical information. Instead, they showed files. Personnel records, classified military documents, private communications between hegemony officials. Sarah recognized some of the documents from her father's private files. Evidence of war crimes committed against human colonies. Records of forced labor operations, communications detailing the systematic suppression of human culture and education. How is this possible? An officer whispered. Marcus Chen's voice filled the silence. Your daughter is very talented with computers, Admiral. Did you really think we sent her to your station without any preparation? All eyes turned to Sarah, who had been standing quietly throughout the exchange. She gave them a small wave and pulled a slim device from her sleeve, something that looked like a standard data pad, but clearly wasn't. Quantum encrypted wireless access point, she explained cheerfully. Been broadcasting a signal to those lovely ships out there since about 5 minutes after you arrested me. My father's people have had complete access to your systems for 3 days. The command center erupted in chaos as officers realized the implications. If Marcus Chen had access to their systems, he could control their weapons, life support, even their communication with Hegemony Command. The station wasn't a fortress anymore. It was a trap. Admiral Creston's golden eyes fixed on Sarah with new understanding. You weren't captured by accident. This was planned. Well, obviously, Sarah replied. Did you think a 15-year-old managed to run a sophisticated smuggling operation without adult supervision? I'm good with computers, not miracles. But why? Why go to all this trouble for a single rescue operation? Sarah's expression grew serious for the first time since her arrest. Because, Admiral, my father wanted to send a message. For too long, the hegemony has treated humans like disposable resources. You take our worlds, enslave our people, and suppress our culture, all while telling yourselves that you're bringing order to the galaxy. She gestured at the displays showing classified documents. But we've been watching, we've been learning, and we've been preparing. What you're seeing here isn't just a rescue operation. It's a demonstration. Proof that your precious security is an illusion, that your intelligence networks have been compromised, and that your most classified information is an open book to us. Marcus Chen's voice cut through the mounting panic in the command center. Admiral, I'm transmitting new instructions to your defensive grid. Your weapons are now targeting hegemony patrol vessels in this system. I suggest you recall them before there are any unfortunate accidents. The tactical officer looked up from his console with horror. Sir, he's right. Our torpedo tubes are locked onto friendly vessels. I can't override the targeting computers. Creston's claws extended involuntarily, a sign of extreme stress among his species. Chen, what do you want? I already told you. My daughter, unharmed and ready for transport in the next 10 minutes. And then what? You disappear back into the void until the next time the hegemony crosses you? There was another pause before Marcus Chen answered. When he did, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Admiral, what happens next depends entirely on how the hegemony responds to what they've learned today. You now know that we can penetrate your most secure facilities, access your most classified information, and turn your own weapons against you. You know that humans are not the helpless prey species you believed us to be. Sarah watched the faces around her as her father continued. You have a choice. Continue your policies of oppression and expansion and face the consequences of a species that has nothing left to lose. Or recognize that humanity deserves the same respect and autonomy you grant to other member species of your so-called galactic community. You're talking about revolution, Creston said quietly. I'm talking about evolution, Admiral. The galaxy is changing whether the hegemony adapts or not. The only question is whether that change comes through negotiation or through force. A new alarm began sounding, and the communications officer looked up with panic in his multiple eyes. Sir, we're receiving distress calls from patrol vessels throughout the system. They're reporting system failures, navigation errors, and weapons malfunctions. It's like their entire technology base is turning against them. Sarah smiled proudly. My father doesn't just plan rescue operations, Admiral. He plans paradigm shifts. Admiral Creston stood in silence for a long moment, weighing options that were rapidly disappearing. Finally, he turned to his security detail. Escort Miss Martinez to Docking Bay 7. Prepare a shuttle for immediate departure. Sir? The lead guard questioned. You heard me. This conversation is over. As they led her from the command center, Sarah heard Marcus Chen's voice one last time. Admiral, I want you to remember something. Today, I came for my daughter with overwhelming force because you took something precious from me. Tomorrow, when other human families are threatened, when other human children are endangered, remember that they all have protectors now. Remember that the age of easy conquest is over. The walk to the docking bay was surreal. The same corridors that had echoed with threats and intimidation just days before were now filled with the quiet efficiency of a defeated enemy. Guards who had sneered at her during her captivity now treated her with wary respect, as if she might suddenly reveal additional hidden capabilities. Docking Bay 7 was buzzing with activity when they arrived. A sleek transport vessel had docked, its design unlike anything in the hegemony fleet. The hull seemed to bend light around it, making details difficult to focus on. And the engine signature was completely unfamiliar. Two figures emerged from the transport as Sarah approached. The first was a tall, athletic woman with short-cropped blonde hair and the confident bearing of a career soldier. The second was a man in his 40s, unremarkable in appearance except for his eyes. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much, done too much, and accepted the weight of those experiences without complaint. Marcus Chen looked exactly like the father she remembered, and nothing like the legendary figure the hegemony feared, which Sarah supposed was exactly the point. "Hello, sweetheart," he said simply. "Hello, Dad," she replied, walking into his embrace without hurry or dramatics. "Did you bring Mom's cookies?" He chuckled, the sound warm and familiar in the sterile environment of the docking bay. "Of course, though we may need to discuss your taste in vacation destinations." "Hey, you're the one who taught me to always have an exit strategy. I had everything under control." I noticed. Very impressive work on their network architecture. We'll have access to hegemony communications for months thanks to the back doors you installed. The blonde woman stepped forward. "Sarah, meet Colonel Davidson. She'll be coordinating our intelligence operations based on the data you gathered." Sarah shook the woman's hand. "Pleasure. I left detailed notes about their security protocols in the data package. Pay special attention to Section 7. They have some interesting weaknesses in their quantum encryption." Colonel Davidson smiled grimly. "I look forward to reading it. Shall we go home?" As they boarded the transport, Sarah looked back at Kepler Station one last time. Through the docking bay's transparent aluminum windows, she could see Admiral Creston watching from the station's command center. Their eyes met across the vast space, and she gave him a small salute. The transport undocked smoothly and began its journey away from the station. As they cleared the docking bay, Sarah saw the other ships in her father's fleet for the first time. They were beautiful and terrible. Vessels that moved like living things and bristled with weapons technology that shouldn't have existed. "Dad," she said as they settled in for the journey home, "I think the hegemony is starting to understand who they're really fighting." Marcus Chen looked out at the stars, his expression thoughtful. "Understanding is the first step toward wisdom, sweetheart. Let's hope they're smart enough to take the second step." Behind them, Kepler Station grew smaller in the viewports, but its importance to the galaxy had somehow grown larger. What had happened there would ripple outward through space and time, carrying a message that would change everything. The age of human subjugation was ending. The age of human liberation had begun. The news of what happened at Kepler Station spread through hegemony space like a virus, jumping from system to system through official channels and underground networks alike. Within a week, every major military installation, governmental facility, and corporate headquarters in the galaxy had heard the same impossible story. A single human had infiltrated their most secure station, extracted classified information, and walked away without firing a shot. Admiral Creston found himself summoned to Hegemony Central Command on Draconis Prime, the jewel world at the heart of their galactic empire. As his shuttle approached the massive orbital facilities surrounding the planet, he reflected on how much his perspective had changed in such a short time. The Grand Conference Chamber where the Hegemony Council convened was designed to intimidate. Massive displays showed the extent of their territorial control, while holographic representations of their military might rotated slowly above the central table. Representatives from dozens of species sat in carefully arranged hierarchical positions, each knowing precisely where they ranked in the galactic order. At the head of the table sat Supreme Chancellor Vothkar, an ancient draconian whose black scales had taken on a metallic sheen with age. His golden eyes held the weight of centuries, and his voice carried the authority of absolute power. Admiral Kresthahn, the Chancellor began without preamble, explained to this council how a single human child managed to compromise the security of a fortress-class military installation. Kresthahn had prepared for this moment during the long journey to Draconis Prime. Honored Chancellor, the security breach was not the work of the child alone, but rather a sophisticated intelligence operation led by the individual known as Marcus Chen. A ripple of whispers ran through the assembled representatives. Many had heard rumors about Chen, but few knew the full scope of his activities. Chancellor Vothkar raised one clawed hand for silence. Marcus Chen. Yes, we are familiar with this name. A terrorist, we were told. A rabble-rouser stirring up trouble on the Outer Rim. You are suggesting he is something more? With respect, Chancellor, our intelligence assessments regarding Marcus Chen have been incomplete. Kresthahn activated his personal datapad, projecting information into the center of the chamber. Based on recent analysis of his operations, I believe we are dealing with something unprecedented in our experience. The holographic display showed a timeline stretching back nearly 2 decades. Each entry represented an event that hegemony intelligence had previously attributed to separate causes: equipment failures, communication breakdowns, seemingly random acts of rebellion, economic disruptions. These incidents, Kresthahn continued, were not random. They represent a coordinated campaign of infrastructure penetration and intelligence gathering spanning 20 standard years. Marcus Chen hasn't been reacting to our policies. He's been studying us. Council member Thexelin, an insectoid klaxon with compound eyes that missed nothing, leaned forward in her chair. You're suggesting this human has been conducting surveillance operations against the hegemony for 2 decades? Impossible. No single individual has those resources. Not a single individual, Kresthahn agreed. But consider this. Marcus Chen is a former hegemony citizen. 30 years ago, he was Dr. Marcus Chen, head of the Cybernetic Warfare Department at our own military research facility on Terra Nova. The whispers in the chamber grew louder. Several council members began accessing their own data systems, searching for information about Chen's background. Chancellor Vothkar's expression had grown dangerous. You're telling us that we trained this individual in our own military techniques. More than that, sir. According to classified records from that period, Dr. Chen was the primary architect of many of the cybersecurity protocols we currently use throughout hegemony space. He designed the quantum encryption algorithms protecting our communications. He developed the access control systems securing our military networks. He created the very infrastructure he has now turned against us. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. If Marcus Chen had helped design their security systems, then he would know every vulnerability, every backdoor, every potential point of failure. Council member Sekhal, a Thessarian warrior whose species prided itself on direct confrontation, slammed one of his 4 fists on the table. How did such an individual become our enemy? What drove him to rebellion? Kresthahn had dreaded this question, but it was inevitable. The Terra Nova incident, sir. Dr. Chen's family was living on the research station when it was attacked by separatist forces. According to the official reports, his wife and young daughter were killed during the assault. The official reports, Chancellor Vothkar repeated slowly. And the unofficial reports? According to classified documents I accessed after the Kepler incident, the attack on Terra Nova was actually a false flag operation. Hegemony intelligence wanted to test their new weapons systems and chose to use separatist forces as an excuse. Dr. Chen's family were acceptable casualties. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. False flag operations were hardly unknown in the intelligence community, but conducting them against their own personnel was crossing a significant line. So Marcus Chen discovered the truth about his family's death and turned against us, Chancellor Vothkar mused. A tragedy, certainly, but hardly unique. What makes him so dangerous now? Creston activated another display showing the ships that had appeared at Kepler Station. Because, Chancellor, he didn't just become a rebel. He became something new. Those vessels that appeared during the rescue operation, their technology is unlike anything in our databases. Hull materials that bend electromagnetic radiation, engine signatures that defy conventional physics. Weapons systems that interface directly with quantum communication networks. Alien technology, suggested Council Member Thexelin. Human technology, Creston corrected. According to intelligence gathered during the incident, Marcus Chen has spent the past 20 years not just building a resistance movement, but developing an entirely new paradigm of technological advancement. He's taken human engineering principles and enhanced them beyond anything we've seen. The display shifted to show technical schematics that had been recovered from the data breach. Even to non-technical minds, it was clear that the designs represented revolutionary advances in multiple fields. Chancellor Vothkar studied the information carefully. Admiral, what is your assessment of our current military position relative to Chen's forces? Unknown. Sir, we have no reliable intelligence on the size of his fleet, the extent of his technological capabilities, or the scope of his support network. What we do know is that he has demonstrated the ability to penetrate our most secure facilities and turn our own systems against us. From a strategic standpoint, we must assume that any installation, any communication, any operation could be compromised at any time. The weight of that statement settled over the Council like a physical presence. The hegemony controlled thousands of star systems through military superiority and technological advantage. If both of those advantages had been neutralized by a single human with a personal vendetta, then everything was in question. Council Member Vorthak, an elderly Altarian diplomat, spoke into the silence. Perhaps it is time to consider alternative approaches to this situation. You're suggesting negotiation? Chancellor Vothkar's voice carried a hint of disdain. I'm suggesting survival, the diplomat replied calmly. This Marcus Chen has demonstrated that he could have destroyed Kepler Station and everyone on it without significant effort. Instead, he chose to send a message. Perhaps we should listen to what that message was. The message, Creston said slowly, was that human subjugation is no longer sustainable. That continued oppression will result in systematic retaliation against hegemony interests. Unacceptable, growled Council Member Sekhal. We do not negotiate with terrorists. Then perhaps, a new voice said from the chamber's communication system, it's time to stop thinking of us as terrorists. Every security system in the chamber activated simultaneously. Blast shields slammed down over the windows while armed guards poured through emergency entrances. Emergency communication networks crackled to life as Central Command tried to determine how an outside signal had penetrated their most secure facility. Marcus Chen's voice continued calmly through the chaos. Honored members of the Hegemony Council, I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but I felt it important to address your concerns directly. Chancellor Vothkar's golden eyes blazed with fury. How are you accessing this facility? Our security systems were designed by me 25 years ago, Chen's voice replied. I've had quite a bit of time to think about their weaknesses. But I'm not here to gloat about technical superiority. I'm here to discuss the future. You murdered civilians, Sekhal accused. You've committed acts of terrorism across multiple systems. There can be no negotiation with someone who... Council Member Sekhal, Chen's voice cut through the accusation with surgical precision. Would you like me to project the classified records detailing your species' conquest of the Meridian colonies? The ones documenting the systematic execution of non-combatants, including children? Or perhaps we could discuss the forced labor camps your government established on Altair 7? The Thessarian warrior fell silent, his four arms tensing with barely controlled rage. Chen continued. I'm not here to trade accusations about past atrocities. Every species in this chamber has blood on their hands, including mine. I'm here to discuss what comes next. And what do you propose? Chancellor Vothkar asked, his voice carefully controlled. Simple. The hegemony recognizes human colonies as autonomous territories with the right to self-governance. Existing human populations within hegemony space are granted full citizenship rights, including representation in this council. Human cultural and educational institutions are restored and protected. In exchange for what? Council member Thexlin demanded. In exchange for not dismantling your entire civilization. The blunt statement hung in the air like a physical presence. No threats, no dramatic proclamations, just a simple statement of capability and intent. You're bluffing, Sekhal snarled. No single faction has the power to threaten the entire hegemony. Council member, Chen's voice carried a note of patient instruction. Over the past week, how many of your critical systems have experienced unexplained malfunctions? How many secure communications have been mysteriously compromised? How many supply shipments have been delayed or rerouted? Admiral Cresthahn checked his personal communication device and paled. Reports were flowing in from across hegemony space, traffic control systems failing at critical moments, military communications being broadcast on civilian frequencies, supply ships changing course without authorization from their crews. This is just a demonstration, Chen continued. Proof that your infrastructure is now transparent to us. Your power grids, your communication networks, your transportation systems. We can access them all. We can turn your own technology against you at will. Chancellor Vothkar leaned back in his chair, his ancient mind processing the implications. You're holding our entire civilization hostage. I'm offering our entire civilization a chance to evolve, Chen corrected. For centuries, the hegemony has maintained order through technological superiority and military dominance. But technology advances, council members. The tools of oppression can become the tools of liberation. And if we refuse your demands? There was a pause before Chen answered. When he did, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Then you'll discover what happens when a species with nothing left to lose gains access to weapons that can rewrite the fundamental laws of physics. The council chamber fell silent as the implications of that statement sank in. They were no longer dealing with a rebellion or a terrorist organization. They were facing something unprecedented, a technologically superior force with a personal grievance against their entire system of government. How do we know you'll honor any agreement? Councilmember Vorthak asked quietly. Because, Chen replied, I have a daughter who wants to live in a galaxy where humans and aliens can coexist as equals rather than predators and prey. Because I have colleagues who believe that diversity of thought and culture makes civilizations stronger, not weaker. Because I've spent 20 years learning that revenge without purpose is just another form of destruction. Chancellor Vothkar activated his personal communication system. Mr. Chen, I will need to consult with the full council and conduct a formal vote on your proposals. How long are you willing to wait for our response? 72 hours, Chancellor. Long enough for you to verify everything I've told you, but not long enough for you to develop countermeasures that might actually work. The communication cut off, leaving the council members staring at each other in stunned silence. Everything they had believed about galactic power structures had just been turned upside down. 3 days later, the Hegemony Council voted to accept Marcus Chen's proposals by a narrow margin. The decision was driven not by altruism or sudden enlightenment, but by cold, pragmatic calculation. A civilization that couldn't protect its own infrastructure from outside interference was a civilization in decline. The vote was announced simultaneously across every hegemony communication network in the galaxy. For human populations that had lived under alien rule for generations, it was the dawn of a new age. For alien species accustomed to human servitude, it was a disturbing reminder that the balance of power in the galaxy was never as stable as it appeared. On a small asteroid base in the Outer Rim, Sarah Chen watched the news broadcasts with her father and his senior staff. The rebellion that had started as a quest for personal justice had evolved into something much larger, the foundation of a new galactic order. "So what happens now, Dad?" she asked as the reports continued to stream in. Marcus Chen smiled, the expression transforming his worn features back into those of the loving father she remembered from childhood. "Now we do the hard work, sweetheart. Building institutions, establishing trade relationships, proving that freedom and cooperation can be more powerful than fear and domination. And if the hegemony changes their minds, then we remind them why they made this choice in the first place." Sarah nodded, understanding. The age of human subjugation was over, but the age of human responsibility was just beginning. They had proven that technology could be a tool of liberation, but technology without wisdom was just another form of tyranny. Across the galaxy, other species watched these developments with interest, some with fear, some with hope, and some with plans of their own. The balance of power had shifted, but power always sought equilibrium. The story of humanity's liberation from the hegemony would be told and retold for generations. But for Marcus and Sarah Chen, it was simply the next chapter in their ongoing struggle to build a galaxy where their family, and all families, could live in peace. The stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter that day, as if the cosmos approved of this small step toward a more just universe.